Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Columbia Climate Conversations, Agriculture and Food Systems. I'm Benjamin Kiesling, postdoc in geochemistry at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory.
And I'm Kailani Acosta, a fourth-year PhD student in Earth and Environmental Sciences, and also at Lamont Doherty.
I want to start tonight by amplifying the work and the words of the Native American Council at Columbia University. The Lenape lived here before and during the colonization of the Americas. We recognize these indigenous people of Manhattan, their displacement, dispossession, and continued presence. This acknowledgement stands as a reminder to reflect on our past as we contemplate our way forward.
We would like to thank the Earth Institute and the Columbia Climate School for sponsoring tonight's event. We would also like to thank Caroline Felix, who is a senior at Columbia College and a Columbia Climate Conversations intern. Caroline is a senior at Columbia studying the history of the African diaspora. She is passionate about international politics, human rights, development, and gender equality, and has worked with organizations like the Council for Foreign Relations and the Malala Fund. In her free time, she writes a column for the Columbia Spectator, reflecting on nuanced intersectional issues of her community.
Tonight's event was imagined, planned, and made possible by Lauren Ritchie, who is a 20-year-old climate activist, writer, podcast host, and fourth-year student in sustainable development at Columbia. She is the creator of the Eco Justice Project, which is a digital platform that educates on climate justice, promotes intersectional climate action, and seeks to make sustainable living more accessible and inclusive by amplifying the voices of marginalized communities. She is also a writer and content strategist for Brown Girl Green, a youth ambassador for the Plastic Pollution Coalition, and the co-host of the podcast Black Girl Blueprint, a platform to center the voices and celebrate the accomplishments of young Black women in a vast array of fields. She is also the creator of Columbia Climate Conversations. Please join me in welcoming your moderator and host for the rest of the evening, Lauren Ritchie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ben and Kailani, for that introduction, and Carolyn as well for being a part of the team. I'm so happy to have all of you here today for this conversation that I think is incredibly important. Food shows up in every facet of our lives for all of us, and I think it's very important for us to have these conversations about sustainable food systems. So I'm very excited for the panelists that we have here today for this conversation. I will let them introduce themselves without further ado. And I would love to hear from each of you just a little bit about yourself, the work that you do, what drew you to food systems, and anything else that you would like to share. So, Tony, how about you get us started and talk about Harlem Grown?
So I got the first one, huh? Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. I'd like to introduce myself as an accidental founder and CEO of Harlem Grown. Harlem Grown is a youth development organization working in Central Harlem, and we work most primarily with elementary school age children and try to change the habits into more sustainable, healthy habits. And I wandered into a school 10 years ago. Actually, September was our 10-year anniversary, and I went in there to volunteer and just to kill time, basically. And you see firsthand, up close, all the the struggles of our less fortunate communities. And one thing led to another, and it just turned to food. I mean, I wish I could sit here and tell you I had a master plan, but I didn't. It was as organic as the food we grow now, but it's been 10 years and there's no turning back at this point.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Tony. Chef JJ, why don't you go next?
Well, thanks for having me, Lauren. It's gonna be a pleasure. Tony, what's up? It's good to see you.
Hey, what's up, Jay?
I'm JJ Johnson, chef and founder of Field Trip here in New York City. I have locations in Harlem, Rockefeller Center, Concourse Level, Long Island City. Our focus is, I consider us a rice bowl shop. Our slogan is rice is culture. I've been in food my whole life. Started in my grandma's kitchen on a step stool, peeling carrots and onions, and I've never looked back ever since. So It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk about food, what I love and think about every day.
Thank you so much, JJ. And Lauren, you are up next.
Hi, I'm Lauren Ornelas, and I'm the founder of Food Empowerment Project. We're a national organization, and we work on various food justice issues. I would love to say, like Chef JJ and Tony, that my work is about food, and it is, but I've always seen food more as a tool for social change. I grew up in Texas. I live in California now, but I was raised understanding the boycott of grapes because of the farm worker issue. I'm a proud Hispanics, recognizing my indigenous roots, and went vegan for the animals, but also was involved in the anti-apartheid movement and saw that the way through the anti-apartheid movement, as well as through the farm worker grape boycott, food was being used as a tool to create change. And so my organization is really focused on that through veganism, through farm worker justice, trying to get people not to buy chocolates forced from slavery or child labor, but also looking wider at lack of access to healthy foods in Black and Brown communities and how that is, clear discrimination, but also as a legacy of colonization on our lands.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have all of you here today. Like I said, food is something that's near and dear, I think, to all of us. Maybe not as much as for you, Chef JJ, but I think for a lot of us, food is something that we think about every day, but there's a lot of complexity that goes into it. And I think this whole idea of food systems and food justice is why it's so important to have these conversations thinking about food and sustainability. And I think kind of wanting to kick off this conversation about food justice and climate change and sustainability, I would love to hear each of you just talk a bit more about the issues that we find surrounding food scarcity and just the complexity of food systems as it stands, whether that's labor, farmers, animals, or access to healthy foods, even just from each of you, what has your experience been working within these fields, and how would you describe the complexity and nuance within it? Also, the way we host these conversations, anyone can jump in. There's no order here, so whoever wants to go first. Oop.
Lauren, go ahead. You ladies first.
Thank you. I guess that, from what I see in all of this is that racism is at the core to a lot of this. And we can't have anything considering or remotely looking like a sustainable food system without at least acknowledging that racism plays a huge role in the problems that are taking place when you look at farm worker justice issues, when you look at lack of access to food in Black and Brown and Indigenous communities. Racism is what's most prevalent there. In our work, we talk about animals and trying to promote veganism so that they are spared some of the suffering and pain that goes on in this world. But we also acknowledge that consuming at least dairy, if we're looking specifically at dairy, that dairy is a product of colonization, that the Americas did not have animals like cows. Columbus, in fact, brought the cows over. And that's why many of us who are indigenous, Latinx, or other people of color have a hard time digesting cow's milk. And a lot of times that's called lactose intolerance. We don't like that because it puts the onus on Black and Brown people as if there's something wrong with us, when there's really nothing wrong with us for not being able to digest the milk of another species, especially when it's at the hands of something like colonization that brought it to our shores. But I would say that I think that food justice issues are seriously some of the most complex issues that I've ever dealt with. I'm used to primarily doing corporate campaignings and fighting corporations, and corporations are definitely at the hands, are responsible for many communities lacking access to healthy foods. And yet we seem to put the responsibility on communities without recognizing that communities are actually where the source of the solutions are. That in fact, if we were to look back and do everything based on community to community, we wouldn't have as many problems as we have now. But corporations are very much the reason why we have the problems that we do. And yet what they try to do is try to make themselves look good. And in my opinion, I consider it to be a lot of white saviorism that goes along with a lot of what the corporations do, whether it be food banks or money that these corporations hand out, or let's say wineries giving money to farm workers, when if they actually paid people living wages, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now. So I think it's an incredibly complex issue. And I think that we are best served when we ask the community what the needs are. I'm sorry, we ask when the community speaks out, saying what they need and what it is that they want, and that's what's adhered to and listened to.
Yeah. Wow, that's deep. Great, great answer. For me, I just find it kind of shocking that, you know, I'm in the richest city in the world, all right, New York City, where we have over 110,000 homeless children, disproportionately placed in communities like where we work in Harlem. And that's not indicative of the community itself, because the community itself is a very proud, working class, working poor community. So to see those numbers and see the numbers of homeless shelters in this close radius, you would think that was reflective of the community, but it's not. You know, we don't want to share the burden across the city. They want to put a shelter in Midtown. You see what happens. They come out and protest, threaten lawsuits. They wind up in Harlem, South Bronx, Brooklyn. So here I am in Central Harlem with 14 homeless shelters in a 4-block radius. Let's shrink it a block into a 3-block radius, and I have 55 fast food restaurants and 29 pharmacies and not one affordable food option. Who's that on? My working class families, my poor families. But, you know, Lauren, I hear you loud and clear, but I go to work with these kids every day, and that is, you can't escape that. I know this is a big, big issue. It's so many layers here. But to look in the eyes of a homeless, hungry child every day is very daunting. It's you check yourself every day on that. And, you know, that boots on the ground thing is as real as it gets. And Chef JJ there, he and I, you know, our proudest moment was during the pandemic. I mean, JJ and some a few other restaurateurs up in Harlem, everybody they answered the bell. We were out there. Everyone else was sheltering in place, and we were out there delivering tens of thousands of hot, nutritious meals in the richest city in the world. I mean, it's so crazy just to think about that we have to do this, right? And I wish I could sit here and debate about why, but that's a luxury I don't have right now. I have to do what I do. There's no not doing it. I know that's not an answer, it's more of a statement, but that's where I'm at.
Well, for me, you know, as you guys were talking, my mind always races to, you know, nutritional insecurity, right? You know, food insecurity is like such a big thing just in general, but then you go into this layer of nutritional insecurity. And I find a different kind of issue, this issue of like accessibility just for folks that can afford to eat at restaurants. And when I hear Tony talk about the community of Harlem, you know, there is no good for you food. There is no, I can have a choice just to eat better that day.
Yep.
There is no, it's finger licking good, it's fried, it's smothered. And the perception of the people that actually own those communities, right? The developers, the landlords, they believe that the people want this food. And, you know, I was looking in the Bronx. I hope to put a field trip in the Bronx one day. And I go, why is there so many Taco Bells from one block to the next block to the, like, don't you guys get tired of like putting, no, the people want it. It's like, no, nobody wants, I don't care how much money you have. Nobody wants the same type of food over and over and over. People want the choice to eat better. And that's why I created Field Trip, was to show, hopefully the world one day, that Black and brown communities want to eat better, have a choice to eat better. And there was a reason why I put Field Trip between 115th and 116th and Malcolm X Boulevard. It's one of the highest corridors of unemployment in New York City. The history runs really deep there. Malcolm X has talked on that corner. There was food on that corner years ago when you do deep research of fish markets, fresh fish markets and bake shops. And when you look there now, It looks like nobody would ever in their life want to open up something there. And when I tell people, when people come there and see who's eating in the restaurant, not just Tony, but when people see who's eating in the restaurant, it is a community builder. It bridges this, food is taking this gap of taking people that are sitting next to other people that live in their community and they're eating, which just happens to be a rice bowl, and they're having these beautiful conversations, they're learning about each other with that barrier broken down, right? Nobody knows how much money you actually have in your pocket. You're actually eating something that tastes really good. And I hope I can grow Field Trip. What I say to myself right now is to be like the king of Uptown when it comes to fast. You want to put us in a fast food category or better for you food category for people, because we ethically source rice directly from the farmer. It's not something that we just buy bleached or parboiled. We are helping, the ultimate goal is to help bring back rice farming in a way that it was done 50, 60, 100 years ago. And that's the way that we all should be able to consume rice.
Thank you all. Yeah, I think that was so incredibly insightful. And I love the way that, all of you really complement each other with your different experiences, but also, the work in Harlem and how all of it really is, to serve those underrepresented communities, the marginalized communities. And I know, Lauren, you were speaking about, like food apartheids as well. And I think that's a big part of what I wanted us to talk about in this discussion. And I think in, the prep for this panel, there was a quote that I saw from, there's a US activist, Dara Cooper. Not sure if anyone's familiar with her work, but she was describing food apartheids as systematic destruction of Black self-determination to control one's food, as well as hypersaturation of these destructive foods that Chef JJ and Tony were talking about, and predatory marketing as well is a big part of it. And all of this, controls the food systems and has a disproportionate impact on Black and Brown communities. And I was wondering, we kind of touched on it already, but just this whole idea of food insecurity, both physical lack of food, but also this lack of healthy food and how it specifically impacts low-income communities and other marginalized groups. But also, I think there's really something interesting to talk about here about what happens when we don't have access to healthy foods. I don't think we think about that enough, just in terms of the physical and mental health consequences of not being able to have these healthy foods. And I would love to hear from each of you just kind of about this whole idea of food insecurity for these low-income communities, but what does it look like to not have access to those foods, and what are the issues there that need to be addressed?
I'll take this one. This is a story that pops in my mind. Black rice, right? Black rice is extremely good for you, packed with tons of vitamins, very hard to find on the shelf in our community, right? And you can find it at Whole Foods, right? But you're not just going to Whole Foods to get black rice. And I remember the first time people in the community, they can't afford to eat Whole Foods. I remember the first time a gentleman walked in the Field Trip, got the pineapple fried rice with salmon and peri-peri sauce. He's excited, he loves salmon, he eats the black rice, and I see him in the street and he spits out the black rice. And I run out of the restaurant and I said to him, "What's going on? Everything okay?" He's like, "No, it tastes good, but I'm not used to, I've never tasted rice like this. It's hard, nutty." Like, he's like describing it like he was a food critic. And I was like, "Well, have you ever had wild rice?" Like, trying to help the mental well-being of, because food is very mental, right? The how your palate reacts, the smell, what's going on around you. And now he comes and eats black rice all the time because mentally he had to get himself prepared for something new, something that was different. He thought it was just going to be like this very soft, mushy rice. And he realized as he got more educated on the black rice, what it would do for him in his everyday life. Okay, I'm getting vitamin B. This is helping me with diabetes. I want this in my diet, right? Which then helps maybe helps you live a longer life.
Yeah, I think that, playing off what you're saying, Chef JJ, is that most of these communities do have high rates of diabetes, a lot of health problems, at least in the communities we've worked in addition to fast food, it's liquor stores and convenience stores. And that's the vast majority of where people are getting their foods. They're not getting them from gardens. They're not getting them from grocery stores. They're literally getting them from gas stations, convenience stores, and liquor stores. And in our work in communities and serving communities is exactly the fact that they want healthy foods. They 100% want healthy foods. They recognize that their family members are sick. They're recognizing these issues are going on. And what it does to not have these healthy foods is it impacts their self-esteem. First and foremost, it makes them feel like, why am I not important enough to have not rotten produce in my store? Why, there's this weird thing that people have about workers or people who are not as privileged as others, that like somehow we're not human, that we don't have these same thoughts. The same thoughts happen. I'm not important because my food is rotten. I'm not important. They feel that way. How does that make the kids feel? We also found that a lot of people who were immigrants ate healthier in the countries they lived in than they do now, because they were able to grow fresh tomatoes. And now they're forced to cook everything with tomato sauce. So in fact, they were used to eating healthier, but now they can't because that's not the food that's accessible to them. Right. So I think that, the desire is there. It's this arrogance and this discrimination that we have of people who are different than us because they don't look like us, they drive differently, drive different cars or whatever it is, that we think somehow they don't feel these things, but they do. They're very aware of organic. We're talking about a lot of people, at least in the communities that we work in, they are or had family members who were farm workers. They knew they had to put on more protective equipment when they were doing conventional farms than when they were doing organic. They know there's a difference, but it's not available in their communities.
Right.
So the awareness is there. It's the problem, like you were saying, Chef JJ, is that Taco Bell's like, oh no, this is what they want. Well, that's not what they want. That's what you want, and that's the only option you're giving them.
Right, right. And what kind of blew my mind was when I wandered into Central Harlem 10 years ago, I had this real notion, just eat healthy. I mean, everything is so simple from the outside. But what we found was a big factor of this is affordability. Why is it so expensive to eat healthy and so inexpensive to eat unhealthy? And that's what it is. So in the beginning, I mean, I was a lunatic around here a decade ago. I'm running around here yelling at the top of my lungs to every elected official. I mean, what the hell's going on here? We have zoning laws for everything else, but we have no zoning laws for bad food. Remember the numbers I gave you, 55 fast food restaurants? Don't forget 29 pharmacies in the same 3-block radius. So you eat bad, you're gonna get sick. But the majority of the families that we work with survive solely on food stamps. And they have no disposable income for food. So all the food comes from there. And in the decade of working there, I've been very familiar, and I go into the supermarkets and I ask the managers, quite frankly, like, hey, why don't you have some choice? And they said, hey, if people buy it, I will get it. It's business 101. They're not gonna buy healthy produce if people aren't gonna buy it, because they'll wind up throwing it away in 3 days, right? It's perishable. So that's what we do as an organization. We try to get the kid from the bottom up, trying to create that demand. The kids grow their own food, and lo and behold, they eat it and they love it. And now they want more of it. So now they go home and the mothers are slowly, it's a long process, because quite frankly, 10 years ago, my first crop, I gave it to kids and it wound up in the garbage. If you don't know what it is or how to prepare it or nutritional value, you give me 1 million pounds of kale, I still have the same problems tomorrow. So you're really not changing anything. So that's why the education is so important. Like JJ, he had to go out on the sidewalk and explain and educate this gentleman. That's what I do every day with elementary school kids, but it's consistent. It's not one and done, it's every day.
That's so interesting. And I think, what I'm taking from all of the things that you guys have said is this importance, but also the empowerment aspect and the community aspects that are so important in terms of these, like psychological effects, but also being involved in where your food's coming from. Like Lauren, what you're talking about, your family being farmers and like knowing the logistics of what comes with that, or, the Harlem community and getting the kids involved and their parents become involved. It seems like it's such a group effort. And I think, Tony, something that I was really, drawn to about Harlem Grown's work is this whole idea of like community gardens specifically and what that does for the community, but also JJ, what you're talking about with, the fish markets and what you do in your rice production. And I was wondering, maybe we can have a conversation about the importance of where this food is coming from and people's relationship to this food, but also just if there are any ways that these communities can take back the power that's been taken away from them by these corporations that are dictating what they eat, or what empowerment comes when people have a say in where their food's coming from, but also the production of it. So I would love to hear from each of you just about that community aspect in, you know, making sure that there's ethical food sourcing going on.
I got to jump on that one. That's my wheelhouse. That's exactly what we do. The first farm garden, we take abandoned community gardens and make them thriving urban farms, and we grow tons of organically grown produce. 10 years ago, no one knew what it was. No one was involved. Last week, we had our Halloween celebration on our main farm. We had 420 people on that farm, no candy. And the kids would not leave. They stay there because that's their farm. The parents come and get their workshops. They do their cooking demos. So go from this guy must be crazy and to have almost 500 kids in this little, was it 80 by 150 square foot garden, and all these people crammed in there all day and loving our food. We have a simple formula that if a child plants it, they'll eat it 100%. And 80% of the time they eat it, they like it. But then we're right back where we started 10 years ago. You can't source what we just grew right here in this community. And that is the problem. But the community loves what we do. I mean, during the pandemic, we started a mushroom chamber. We grow 100 pounds of mushrooms a week. Now, mushrooms in Harlem, you give it to the parents, they're not gonna eat it. What is a mushroom? Mushroom's a good meat substitute. But with the kids, we teach them every week, and you send them home with simple recipes and the product to make this dish. And now every week, here come the parents. They clean out our community fridge every day of our mushrooms. So it's just education, empowerment, and for us, everything we grow and give out is free of charge. We don't charge. How do you charge poor people for anything? So I raise all the money and underwrite all of our programming. All of our programming is 100% free. So that's very helpful for us, but it's all about education and access.
I mean, for me, in the beginning of Field Trip, I used to try to tell everybody that their rice was freshly milled. It was coming from a farm. These were the farms are from. Everybody was looking at me with 10 eyes. What are you talking about? There's no such thing as freshly milled rice. What is that? And I learned, I always believe in the food. Something that Tony just said, if it's not good, you don't know what to do with it. Nobody's gonna nobody cares about it. So it's like, let everybody just believe in the food first. And it was like, oh yeah, this is brown rice or this is black rice. Then I love this bowl, or I love this dish. It's like, well, hold on, where can I get it? Right. And now we have a lot of people that walk through the door and want to just buy our rice raw or cooked, because now they know they can't get it anywhere that they go, or there's nowhere to purchase this rice. And for me, that was really important. That's a big ethos of Field Trip, is sustainably sourced rice. No rice is in bleached, enriched, or parboiled. Most of the rice that we're eating on the shelf is bleached or enriched, which is terrible for us all. And I know that in history at one time, they needed to have parboiled rice, right? Because there was no more African slaves. There was no more Black people that wanted to be rice farmers. The American agricultural system, that gold rush era, that was not just about gold or cotton, rice was a part of that. And it started to collapse. So parboiled rice was this way to keep the rice of gold rush going in the economy. So I'm purchasing rice from the days of how rice is supposed to be cultivated and given out to the world. And you know, I've been able to find over 35 rice farmers in the country that want to give rice, that want to sell rice to Field Trip. A lot of them are commodity rice farmers, the same way there's commodity beef or pork or chicken farmers. And they wind up selling that rice at their farmers market because there's the only place they feel that people would want it. They don't think that there's a place that would want like freshly milled rice grown the right way. And I believe if I can get the rice agriculture system back on this path, when Lauren and Tony, when schools are giving out, rice at lunch as their hot meal, is now that kids are able to get that really good for you, better for you rice, because that it has taken that turn for the better. And hopefully we'll see pharmacies go from 27, Tony, to 10 in communities, right? Because every time I see a pharmacy open, I do think about all the conversations that me and you have had just about the food that we're surrounded by.
Yep.
I think that when you talk about, definitely in everything we've done, affordability is the number one problem. It's not a matter of what the USDA wants to dictate as food deserts in terms of proximity, it's affordability, which is why we as an organization really push living wages, because we need more equity. We need everybody to be at an equitable place to be able to buy healthy foods, because we also work on farm worker justice issues. We also know that we can't pay farm workers any less. Some aren't even paid at all. Much less what they go through just to sustain themselves, even here in California, where you have horrible abuses taking place against farm workers, many of whom are unhoused, they live in cardboard boxes. COVID was very hard on the farm workers. So when we're talking about ethical eating, farm workers and farm worker justice has to come into the equation. And I think that's one of the reasons why people growing their own food eliminate some of that concern. If you're growing your own food, if you know the community members, if you're watching your food grow, you know how those who are harvesting it are being treated. And that's why it really feels like community to community is the way to go. During COVID, one of the things we did is we actually, as ironic as it sounds, we actually gave food to farm workers. Farm workers did not have food. They were going without food. And so our organization literally had to send food to farm workers who are feeding all of us. And we're essential workers, but we're not being treated as essential workers like some of the higher paid essential workers. And certainly we're still facing with, especially during the last administration, but still currently with this administration, dealing with threats of deportation and problems such as that. So affordability is to me is the key. And that's why we need to have everybody being able to afford it. And so they have the right to choose what kind of foods they want to eat, and they have the right to be healthy, I mean,
that's a big part. That's a big part for me. That's a big part for me, Lauren, and Field Trip is, I think where we are now as a company, we are as affordable as we can get. And, inflation is January, top of the year, we're going to see inflation at a skyrocket amount, something that's probably like really scary. And I always say, as I grow, I can then lower the price, because then I can get more, I'm purchasing more food. And I go back and kind of look at like Chipotle when they were like $15, $16, $17 at that time. And then they took this moment and went and dropped to like $7, $8. And I just think if in the communities that I go to, and as I can keep ethically sourcing better throughout the whole menu, if I can get to a $7, $6, $5 bowl, where that means that everybody, hopefully then that more people, I'm not gonna say everybody, but more people can go there and eat, then I see a better place for us.
I agree.
That makes sense. Yes, thank you. And I think a lot of what has come up kind of naturally and organically in this conversation has been about the pandemic so far. Like, you've been talking about the various projects that you worked on during the pandemic, as well as, Lauren, what you were saying about, what happened to the farmers during the pandemic as well. And I would love to hear from each of you both, just more about how COVID impacted your work in this sustainable food system specifically, but also thinking more broadly about, what's happening to farmers and what goes on with our food, if there are any ways that COVID has also just changed the sustainable food landscape as well in general, and if there are any permanent changes that have also been made since then? Because I think there was a lot of, conversations, about food, even in terms of, food miles and who's able to get food, can food be flown out? There's just so much that goes into it that we don't really think about when we're just seeing the food on our plate. So in terms of COVID, I don't know what changed with food systems that you noticed.
COVID changed absolutely everything where we are. I'm sitting almost in the same place almost 2 years ago in March when we went into shutdown. Everyone was told to stay home, shelter in place. I told all my staff to stay home, and that was all right. But then 2 days later, when they shut down schools, all the kids in my program, every single one of them get their nutrition from school, breakfast, lunch, and supper if they're in after school. So where are they going to eat now if schools are closed? And New York City, I give them credit. They came up with the grab and go program almost within 2 days. But then think about this. Every day a kid has to go to school and get 3 bags of a sandwich, a yogurt, a milk, and an apple if they're lucky. And on Friday, they get 9. That's it. At the same time, we deem their parents, the working poor, essential employees who have to go out there. So while we're over here hoarding toilet paper and paper towels, they have to wait until they get their paycheck and get it. Now everything is gone. I mean, it was a perfect storm of need. So that's when JJ and I kind of came together, and I told you a lot of my kids are homeless. 40% of the kids in my program are living in homeless shelters. It is gut-wrenching. And to imagine them sustaining themselves on this crap that they're giving them from the school. I know it's something, but I mean, come on. And JJ, to his credit, he went above and beyond and was giving us, like I said, thousands of nutritiously balanced hot meals that we delivered to the shelters ourselves. And I wish I could sit here and wonder about the food system. I mean, we're right next to the Hunts Point Market, is about what, 3 miles from us, JJ?
Give or take.
Yeah, all the fresh produce from Maine to South Carolina comes in 3 miles from where I am, yet I can't access it. It's and that's what I said. I kind of have to choose my battles, because we have to feed these kids. We have to love them, hug them, and nurture them, right? And to see this bigger system at play here, as usual, the only ones who lose are my kids and their families. And we, if I start thinking that the big system and all of that, I get distracted, I get overwhelmed, and then you question, why do I even go to work tomorrow? It's just overwhelming, right? I have to go to work tomorrow. So JJ, again, publicly, I just thank you for that, because it turned out to be our finest moment. But man, when you think about what we did and how we did it and when we did it, come on, man. That's real work.
It was, I always thank Tony. It was a changing moment for us as a business as well, right? I mean, I think a lot of us as founders or owners, the people at the top, I remember when I would go to, I call it the committee, and be like, oh, we should do this. But when COVID came around, it was like, okay, I had to get my team to believe in, we should do this, right? And the purpose of this was the right thing to just do. Like, nutritional insecurity, food insecurity has always been near and dear to my heart. I just never felt like I had direct impact. And in this moment with Tony, out of a bunch of moments, there was direct impact. Loading up the truck, jumping in the truck, going to the shelter, handing it off to people, smiles on faces. Was like, oh wow, this is we are really doing something. The team seeing that, feeling it, knowing that they're bagging the stuff up, right? That they're giving it to somebody potentially in need, and also learning through that process that there was 2 team members of mine in a shelter. I never knew that.
Yeah.
So I learned about my team as well, that there was people working for me that were also in need as well through the hardest times, supporting their family, trying to maneuver through this. But the one thing that I think I truly learned on the food system was our agricultural system was broken down completely, knocked down to its knees. The agriculture system of the United States is what keeps this country rich and going. And we are in dire need right now because the supply chain is fully broken. And the people that were doing those jobs don't want to do those jobs anymore because for whatever reason, if it's they didn't get paid enough money, if they realize they worked really hard. And I've heard a lot of the stories of people that used to deliver our food to us from places that now work at Amazon or FedEx because they say these companies just didn't care about me. I worked there for 22 years. Mm-hmm. So be really concerned out there about the food system. You're going to see a lot of collapsing. And what I'm trying to do now is source really local back again to the basics, right? Do I get my beef grass-fed from upstate New York? Do I buy my collard greens from somebody in New Jersey? Do I get my salmon from here, right? Really trying to figure out how to source locally. And I think that also then uplifts another community while doing that.
I think when, first of all, thank you both for your work. I have a lot of things with the kids that live in the communities where we're in, and a little bit from you, Tony, is like, I have to step back and be like, okay, that's somebody else is working on that. And I thank you for that. I can't take that on too. You know what I mean? Like this, like there's just so much to do and it hurts your heart, right? I mean, these are little ones who deserve a shot at a great life, but specifically in terms of, COVID and impacting, I think that, we were in a climate in California where you had a lot of farm workers working for people who didn't believe COVID even existed, right? So they believed that rhetoric. So when farm workers would ask for things like masks or soap and water to wash their hands, they'd be laughed at. You had workers who were given hairnets instead of masks to put on. You had farm workers who were still living in bunk beds, who were, forced to travel, on buses and carpool together. And so we had incredibly high rates of COVID in the Latinx communities here, because of the fact that they were still forced to work and live in conditions, some paid for by the employers, that were spreading COVID, and so, I think it's definitely still impacted. COVID's still around, right? We still have high rates of COVID in some of the counties here in California, predominantly red areas. But this is, again, it's not as if the farm workers didn't know what was happening, but there was a lot of confusion and distortion, including things like if you get the vaccine, you'll become sterile, which is, a big deal to many communities. But you also had language justice being an issue. Many of our farm workers don't speak English or Spanish. They speak their indigenous languages. Many are from Mexico that only speak their indigenous languages there. So when you have information being given out about COVID or the vaccine, which is only in English, very small amount being done in Spanish, and zero being done in indigenous languages, you had a lot of problems. So for us, I would say that more has been done to talk about language justice issues as well.
Thank you. Yeah, language justice, is a big part that I think we don't typically think about even in terms of these conversations, but that is so true. Thank you, the three of you, for sharing that. I think we're running a little bit low on time. This always happens every panel. There's always so much to talk about. But I was wondering, for our audience, do you have any advice when it comes to getting involved in sustainable eating? And I guess, how can we empower our audience to get involved with these sustainable food systems, whether that is vegetarianism or veganism or ethical eating in whatever capacity that may look like? I'd love to hear from you guys if there's any advice that you would like to share.
Advice. Go ahead, JJ.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I was gonna give some small basic stuff. Any community, I always say this, any community you live in, rich, poor, somebody needs help, right? and look really deep in that community, and you'll see who needs help and help in your local community before you start helping out nationally. And that will help change your community. Tony, prime example. And then 2 is, when you move into a community, I know we all love Trader Joe's, I know we all love Whole Foods, but pull up on your store manager in that local supermarket and look on the shelves and ask them to bring in some other stuff, right? Because you have the power to change what's on the shelf. You can start demanding things. And if you and your friends are demanding more in that local supermarket, you will start to see that food system change, and that will not just impact you, will impact the people around you. Always when I shoot my cooking show, we always make a joke when I do oxtails. I do it every season, and we have to go somewhere in Brooklyn or in the Bronx to go get oxtails, because only certain communities will only have oxtails, right? And that's truly how the food system is broken down. That's how certain communities think this is who's in the community and this is what people want. But there's people that just want to have options to other stuff. So push on them. And I always walk in a local supermarket and ask for the store manager and like demand like something. Where's the rainbow Swiss chard? Why don't I see it? Right. And they're like, well, what do you mean? No, we can get right. You know, they start to go in this panic. And it's something, I think it could be something fun for everybody that's listening in to help change the food system.
Yep. JJ, you stole my whole thing, man. But yeah, to everybody listening, I mean, something bothers everyone, right? And we have this, I don't know, we're like paralyzed by what if. I mean, we just have to just be fed up, right? And you go out and you just get active, whatever that is. And like JJ said, do that in your own community. It's not unique to Harlem. I travel all over the place to do my talk, and there's a Harlem in every city in this country. So it's not black, white, or brown either. It's poor. If you're poor in this country, this is your lot. This is what you're looking at. You know exactly where you are when you're driving through a community. You see miles of fast food, drive-through pharmacies at every intersection. You know where you are. Not a salad bar to be seen, nothing healthy, right? Call it out. Don't just, this is a capitalistic society, right? We're driven by money in this country from every level, from the top all the way down to our very own communities. These shopkeepers down there, they're just trying to make a buck. You go in there and you tell them what you want for your dollar. You want some healthy options in there. Don't settle for what they're giving you. Demand, like JJ said, demand something better. They'll get it.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned salad bars, because the high school that is in the area in California that's known as the salad bowl of the U.S. actually took out the salad bar for the kids at the high school. So yeah, it's so backwards. I always feel like, for those of us who have the privilege of eating more than one time a day, that we have a lot of responsibility there. And I think for those of us, I know Chef JJ, for those of us who are vegan, to remember that, oh, you too. Yeah. You're vegan for the animals, just to remember that there's other ways for you to make sure that others in the food system are treated justly. And I think that when we talk about going to the store, I think it's great to make sure that they're carrying what you want them to carry, but also to ask them to stop carrying products or companies that are bad for workers. And I know that might be a whole lot, which is why we try to honor the boycotts called by farm workers themselves. So the Driscoll's berry boycott is one that we ask everybody to ask your store not to have. And, to make sure to support organizations, definitely more at a local level. What's happening with lack of access to healthy foods, food apartheid, is community by community. There's not one thing that's going to fix it for every community. Right. So finding out in those communities what you can do to help. And quite honestly, if you're a person of more privilege, then just accept that maybe it's donating to those organizations. That might be what you can do, is give them your money. And one of the other things we encourage people to do is, if you go to farmers markets, to be sure to try to support Black and brown farmers. They have experienced more obstacles to getting ahead than many other farmers have. So if you're going to a farmers market, please support those farmers.
And Lauren, I love everybody. I love vegans. I love
Good,
everybody.
good. We want you to love us because we love what you're
field
doing.
trip. We have a place for all. That's
He has a great vegetable bowl, great
That's
vegetable
great
bowl. I
vegetable
eat it
bowl.
all the time.
big thing for me.
'Cause
Like I actually
am-
tell my friends to stop as chefs when people are saying there's supposed to be vegan items on the menu. It's supposed to be a place for everybody. And even if
Thank
somebody has a
you.
special diet, us as chefs, we should be trying to figure out how to give that person the best possible meal when
Thank
they're in our
you.
establishment.
Well, I
So-
want to go meet you all. There's my heart is in Harlem for something they did for somebody in the 60s that's controversial, but I'll just say that Harlem welcomed this person when they were not allowed to be in New York City. And so
right.
Harlem has my heart, and I've been there only once, but I would love to go and check you all out.
Come on. Anybody listening is always welcome to come by Harlem Grown. It's the best hour you've ever spent in New York City. We're told that all the time.
That I myself included. Columbia
Yeah.
is not too far from Harlem. So
Not at all.
Chef JJ, when you see me in field trip this weekend, don't act brand new because I'm letting you know right now that I'm on my way. And
Yeah.
also Harlem Grown too. Very excited. I think we only have the 6 minutes left. And this was one of the questions that was also in the chat. So thank you all for being here today. I think just the last thing that I would like is just how can people support you and your organizations, help you with your work, other ways to contribute to sustainable food systems, as well as any other resources that you would like to highlight or recommend. This is just kind of like the final question to share any final thoughts and just plug yourselves as much as possible so people can support and volunteer and get involved. So yes, thank you.
Mine is always easy. I think everybody asks me as a founder of a nonprofit to say, send money. That's the easy way out. I always say, just give a damn. That's it. Give a damn. Don't take it. Fight for solutions. And then we can change this. We're sitting around waiting for someone else to change it. We are those someone else's, right? We can do this. So in your own community, there's need right outside your door. Sometimes it's right there in your own house. You don't have to look that far. So just give a damn.
Tony, we are such kin because as a founder, I feel the same way. I'm like, no, I want people to do something.
Yep.
I would say in addition to that, eat your ethics. If what you're eating isn't meat what you believe ethically, then rethink what you're eating. Learn more about where your food comes from. I say that acknowledging that that's a privilege, right? Looking into where your food comes from is a privilege. So that's not something I would say to everybody, but I'm saying it to people who clearly have the time to hop on a Zoom meeting. And so if you have that privilege, please take it to make sure that your food choices aren't impacting anybody negatively, locally or globally.
Right.
Support these two. They're doing amazing work. If you have it, you got East Coast, you have West Coast. There's no excuse now. And if you do live in New York City, definitely hit up Harlem Grown. Go to the farm, hang out, breathe that fresh air. I remember that first time Tony, we talked on the panel together. He dragged me over. He said, "You got to come right now." And walked in the green room. I was like, "Whoa, this is the best oxygen I've ever breathed in my life." But go see it. You would never think that you'd see a farm right there in the heart of Harlem. And like Tony said, there's a place like this. There's a community. Harlem's in every community. And Lauren, go support her and what she's doing and standing up for people, being that big voice. So I'm only here to cook really good food and supporting organizations in these ways the best I can.
And it's really good food, and he hires locally. He does it the right way. If I was in business like that, I would do it the same way, Jay. So keep it up, man. Don't be so shy over there. You're doing it too, man.
Amazing. Well, this was such a pleasure. You have all brightened up my Tuesday night. I cannot thank you enough for coming and talking. You're all doing such important work. Definitely will be checking out Harlem Grown and Field Tripped. And Lauren, thank you. It's nice to see you again from the conversations we've had before about these things.
Well, maybe when we get more safer out there to travel, I would really love to meet all of you and just really honored to be a part of this and so excited about all of your work that I get to brag about now. So it's good to know you're there.
Same here.
Very
Same
nice.
here. All right, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you all for coming. Goodbye. Take care. Bye.